Now, we're going to talk about retrieval. So, getting that information back out. Because we're storing so much information, right? But what would it matter if we couldn't pull the information back out? That'd be kind of pointless, right? We're storing all this information, but we can't use it? That doesn't make much sense. So, I'm having our little retrieval retriever here, and I'm hoping it'll give you imagery for remembering the retrieval process by showing you a retriever. And if I continually say retriever, you will be able to remember retrieval better. I know, I'm weird. But anyway, retriever, retrieval. Now I'm going to confuse those words. Well, retrieval is just pulling back these memories out of our little filing cabinet to look at them. But you're like, well, sometimes when I put things away in my filing cabinet or my folder, I can't find them. When I save a file on my computer, I can't find it. I can't access it again. That's because of a failure in some of the encoding or storage process. We have to have enough clues or cues to help us remember where that information is. So if you have a categorization or different file folders in which to file your different documents, might help you remember where you put it better. And that's kind of the analogy we can use for our memories. So, our available information is the information stored in our memory. That's all the information you could ever have. Your accessible information is exactly what it says. What's accessible? What can we retrieve and grab out? And that's going to be based on cues in our environment. So maybe we're talking about the memory storage process, encoding, storage, retrieval. Well, maybe you're just going to remember retrieval a little better because I gave you this visual cue of a retriever. And he's a cute, good boy, I'll be honest, right? So with our cues in our environment, we can't be overloaded with too many memories. This is called the cue overload principle. A cue must be specific. It can't be a cue for all of these memories because it's not going to work. It has to be related to one thing. So if I gave you a memory cue of a dog, you might be like, well, dogs are used in a bunch of examples. That doesn't help. We have to make something specific about this dog that's going to help you use it as a cue for remembering retrieval. So I got the dog breed that's closest to the name retrieval, the retriever retrieval, or retrieval retriever, rather, to help you remember it. And it's a pretty golden dog on the farm, and maybe you'll remember this image when you're going back and trying to take your test and remembering retrieval and how it works. You're going to remember the retriever. So hopefully I've made that distinct enough to help you encode this information to pull it out later. Now, we also are going to talk about in retrieval the encoding specificity principle. This is the extent to which the retrieval cue matches or overlaps the memory trace of an experience. It will be effective in invoking a memory. So, recall versus recognition tests. How much does the cue lead us to relating the idea? Now, the cue it has to be connected. I'm trying to think of a better way to explain this. Because the cue has to be distinct, it also has to relate with the retrieval process. So, here's an example. If I used any old dog for the retrieval picture, it may be a cue because I don't use dogs in my PowerPoint at all, besides classical conditioning. So it may give us a cue of how to remember retrieval. But because I used a retriever, there's so much overlap in those terms, that's going to be encoding specificity principle. So that retriever cue, because they're called retrievers because they get information, right? They get toys, they retrieve things. Hopefully that'll help you remember the retrieval process because there's so much overlap between that cue and what I'm trying to teach you. Another example is a recall versus recognition test and studying and testing in the same room. So sometimes in recall and recognition tests, any multiple choice test you take is going to be a recognition-based test. We're hoping that when you read a problem, you're going to be able to recognize the answer in a choice of answers. And that's where you get that overlap and that encoding specificity principle. With studying and testing in the same room, it's often encouraged that you take you take a test in the same room you were studying because you're having all of this information, your desk, maybe you're drinking a Coke, maybe you're, I don't know, you have your phone on your right, you're playing some music. That domain is going to help you remember certain clues about what you're trying to remember, because it's giving you the same scenario. It in and of itself is going to help you illuminate the information, because that state gives you so much context from which to remember what you were studying. So for me, I always remember this slide because I was sitting at my desk in this position. I have my little retriever on the screen. I'm talking about retrieval, and everything, it kind of feels familiar. It's giving me cues to the last memory I have doing this, where I recorded the video and then my computer died, so I had to record it again. So that memory is coming back because of all these cues I have sitting in the same position, looking at the same slide, and having a bunch of mess of papers on my desk pushed to the side so you all can't see it. That's kind of the encoding specificity principle. Now, we also have what's called the testing effect. Basically, it's saying that when you're tested on something and you can recall it, the odds are is you are going to be able to recall it later. So just with that repetition of being able to pull that information out, it should get easier and easier. Then with the retrieval-induced forgetting, this doesn't happen very often, but this is just the idea that when you are testing yourselves on remembering something, you're only going to remember the most salient points about that topic, and other stuff may be forgotten about it. Have you ever gone through doing note cards for a test and try and remember definitions and maybe an example? Well, maybe you read the word on the front and you were able to give the definition, but you forgot some small detail or some example, so you didn't understand the whole concept. That's this idea of retrieval-induced forgetting. Because you're only focusing on certain information when you're practicing, the other information may get forgotten because you're not pulling it out when you're going through. Now, there are varieties of memory we're going to get to. Episodic memories are going to be remembering episodes in our life. For example, what did you do on Monday? What was your first date like? Things like that. Think of a TV series, right? They're going to show little snippets. That's your life. Snippets of your life. I don't know how to explain it outside of that. It's pretty straightforward. Semantic memories are going to be our storehouse of more or less permanent knowledge. So this is going to be your facts. This is going to be your rules for grammar, right? This is this permanent knowledge that's been kind of pounded into our heads so long they almost become instinctive, right? They're just permanent knowledge. For example, who is the 44th President of the United States? If you need a clue, this one, Donald Trump is the 45th president. So who is the 44th president of the United States? If you said Barack Obama, you are correct. This is a semantic memory. So this is more or less permanent knowledge, as he was the president during our lifetime, or one of them. I know a lot of my students are younger, but he was the president for a pretty long time in your lifetime. Who delivered the famous I Have a Dream speech? I really hope you know this one. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is going to be examples of our semantic memory. And it's also going to be words and their meanings. You don't have to think about what words you're trying to produce most of the time, unless you're me and you overanalyze every word you say. But words and their meanings are also going to be held in our semantic memories. Now, we're also going to have what's called a collective memory. This is the kind of memory that people in a group share. So this could be a family. Maybe you have some family memories or traditions that get passed on. It could be a community. So it could be, Washington. You have certain stories and memories within a community that get passed on. And remember local custom, historical events in a unique fashion. Like I'm from Chicago, so we have different community memories that kind of build that sense of camaraderie among the people and these things that we share. For example, remembering local customs. In Chicago, whenever it snows out, people put lawn chairs and boards and all types of weird stuff in their parking spot so no one steals the parking spot that they shoveled. This is just a local custom with Chicago people that is a kind of community memory. Everyone does it, and it's kind of something we share that's really weird, but it's a unique fashion of presenting it. Schoolmates, so maybe your school has some memories, etc. Now, an autobiographical memory. So an autobiography is a story about someone's life written from their perspective, right? Well, autobiographical memories are going to be remembering specific events that have happened over the course of one's entire life. So what is the difference between an episodic and autobiographical memory? An episodic memory is going to be a snippet. It's going to be like more everyday experiences, whereas autobiographical memory is going to look at very salient events. And I'm trying to find it in your textbook so I know where to tell you to look. Sorry. That's going to be on pages 3 and 4 of this unit to help you kind of differentiate those two. Now, a flashbulb memory is very interesting. Now, a flashbulb memory gets its name because in the olden days, they used to take pictures with a giant camera and hold the flashbulb up, and it would go with a very bright light, sometimes the smoke you see in the movies, and take a picture. Well, that flashbulb memory is a vivid memory in learning important news. Now, this could be a memory, but it's so emotionally charged that you're going to remember it. For my generation, it's remembering where you were when the terrorist attacks of 9/11 occurred. I can remember where I was sitting, what I was feeling, what I was doing. It's very distinctive, right? That emotionally charged nature of the situation will help me remember it better. But my memory is not going to be perfect, but it will feel very perfect because my emotions overtake that situation. For you all who didn't experience that, I'm trying to think of another salient example. Maybe when a certain celebrity died. Maybe something like that was very important to you. You remember where you were when that happened. I have an aunt who, remembers every detail about where she was when Elvis died. Right? Those are flashbulb memories. So we have lots of memories, right? And the way to improve our memory, this will be good for your studying, is to construct meaningful cues that remind us of the original experience. Cues should be distinctive and not associated with other memories, as we talked about with that cue overload principle. So just trying to analyze situations more and really elaborate on them, thinking about all those sensory experiences that blend into the moment, so that when you're taking a test, you can remember those distinctive cues and not panic because you forgot to encode something properly. Because when something doesn't get encoded properly, it's just us forgetting. So those meaningful cues are going to be very important. One example I have is I always remember when I was studying parts of the brain in psychobiology. I had a whole course on it. For the hippocampus, I would always remember a hippo because I convinced myself that hippos have good memory. And I always pictured a big purple hippo. Now that's really silly, but it helped me remember it. So these things don't have to make sense, we're just giving them distinctive cues, right? So for me, it was creating that imagery of a hippo, a big purple hippo. Helped me remember the duty of the hippocampus. That's one example. Take it as you will. But mnemonic devices are also memory aids or tricks. So there's a peg word technique, and it's basically rhyming associated with numbers. So kind of like that memory athlete used. He associated those different numbers with different sounds. Well, the peg technique looks at how we can rhyme the numbers. So if you ever have to remember numbers, you try this rhyming technique. But 1 sun, 2 shoe, 3 knee, etc. There are a lot of songs like that may come to mind, but that's peg word technique. Method of loci, it's this visual spatial exercise that helps you remember things. I had someone teach me the chambers of the heart, but using a house as an analogy. And she walked me through the different rooms of the house. And that helped me remember it for a short period of time. I don't remember it now, but I remember the visual imagery she had of the blood flow like me walking through the stairs of the house. So it's using location and familiar places to help us remember information. Excuse me. Then there's also acronyms and acrostics. Acronyms are going to be like SCUBA, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. And then, what's another one? Roy G. Biv. That's an acronym. Each letter, or no, not Roy G. Biv, excuse me. That's a, maybe. But acronyms are going to form a word that kind of has its own meaning, like scuba. We know what scuba gear is, but it stands for something else much larger. We've condensed it and recoded it to remember what scuba gear is. Acrostics are going to be like, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So we remember those meanings in those terms for math order of operations, right? And we're doing that by giving it a word association, and each letter is going to begin with one of the processes for the order of operations. Please, parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, and subtract. PEMDAS. Some people say PEMDAS. That could be an acronym. But please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, that's an acrostic. Or like when you read music, you read the lines as every good boy does fine. And the space in between is FACE, F-A-C-E. Those are acronyms and acrostics, and they help very much for remembering things that you may have learned years ago. Rhyming is really good for helping because it's elaborating on that material. And again, kind of goes with that peg word technique. So we're creating that association with the sounds and just building on that. Sometimes making a song with it can work. Whatever way helps us make these cues more distinct. So providing our own examples is a great way to do that. Chunking, like we said with the telephone numbers, and imagery, creating an image in your head. It may help you remember. Like the retriever, right? If I talk to you about retrieval, you might mention that dang retriever and be like, wow, that was a lot of saying the word retriever, but I remember it. And that's it for this week. Sorry, I thought I had more, but I guess not. I will have the eyewitness testimony PowerPoint next, so make sure you watch that one as well, because we're going to base this week's activity on these two PowerPoints. Hope y'all have a good week.